Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitaamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamritam Duhe Namaha Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Charnuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you all for joining us again. We're in the 14th chapter, and last week we reached verse 18 of the chapter. And Lord Krishna was talking about various aspects of what we call the gunas, sattva guna, rajo guna, tamo guna, rajas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. These three gunas are the topic of this whole chapter, and now he's talking about the different characteristics of them and so on. He's been covering a variety of topics, the definition of each of those gunas, which means basically attributes or qualities, except we dropped those English words because they don't really cover the full meaning of these words. So we're just sticking with guna, and you'll get the hang of it as we go along if you're just joining us fresh. So he talked about the definition of these gunas, the method of binding that they exert on all beings, definitely including us, and their indications and the effect they have on people, and also the ultimate outcome from the standpoint of what happens after we leave the body. So after these 5 topics, in the next 2 verses, Lord Krishna is going to talk about how to transcend the gunas, which is the whole purpose of this chapter. It's not just to lament our fate that we're stuck in all these gunas and they're torturing us in this way and that way. The whole point is to say, okay, now how do we get out of this bind? Like Amma has been talking about Maya, for a month, with all these talks. She's not just saying that so that we all get depressed, that we're, in the clutches of Maya. The idea is how do we get out of Maya? So this is, finally we get to this topic, the main topic, how to go beyond the gunas, which means how to become a gunatitaha, one who has transcended the gunas. It just means the same thing as being liberated, but here we're looking at it from the standpoint of these gunas. So it's interesting because we can sort of translate this into our own daily life, how we have these gunas that are influencing us physically and mentally. And so long as we identify with the gunas, which means, in a practical sense, the characteristics of the physical body and the subtle body. Now, if you're not familiar with what the subtle body includes, it includes the pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha, which means the sheath that has to do with the energies in the body. You may be even kind of dull in terms of energy, but you know when you feel tired, you know when you feel energetic. That's energy, right? It's not like a bone or, something you can measure with some kind of a stick. It's a subtle thing. So that is part of the subtle body. And the mind is, of course, with all the thoughts and emotions, that's part of the subtle body, and the intellect as well, the ability to rationalize, to analyze and judge what is good, what is bad, etc. All this, and our convictions as well, and we have logical, reasons for our convictions. So all that is in the intellect. So these two the physical and subtle bodies are the primary experiences that we have in the day in terms of gunas. So because we identify with all those emotions and the body and all that, it means we remain bound to samsara. Birth, death, over and over again. So only by becoming gunatitaha, by transcending those gunas, can we become liberated. And in verse 18, Krishna seemed to be encouraging us to pursue sattva guna. Sattva guna is the purest of the three of them. It symbolizes purity. And he seems to be encouraging us, but we should remember that that's only in contrast with the other two. There's only three, right? Tamas is really dark and lazy and indolence and all this selfishness. We don't want that. Rajas is hyperactivity or the impetus to be constantly moving and never peaceful, never resting. So we don't want that either. So what's left is pure sattva, which is balance, peace, quietude, all that. So that's what we're seeking in spiritual life, because it's better than what we're experiencing now. But sattva, though it may be an improvement over the other two, it still needs to be transcended. It helps us understand Amma's teachings in the scriptures for sure. It helps us meditate, it helps us do mantra japa and everything. But someday we will have to even transcend sattva, because it's a quality. And there's only one way to become infinite, to merge in God. That's by relinquishing all qualities, all attributes. For a realized being like Amma, even dharma is considered to be a dualistic notion. So sattva is definitely, because it's in comparison with two others, it's definitely dualistic. But even dharma has a dimension of dualism to it, because you have good and bad. And for people like us who are not realized, we need that. We need dharma. And we need to be able to distinguish between adharma and dharma, because as little kids we're so selfish. We want everything for ourselves. So the parents have to say, no, you have to share with other people. That's dharma. Don't take more than you need. All these things we have to be taught, because it doesn't come to us naturally. But for someone who's an embodiment, like living God, Amma as that one person said, God's love in a human body. They don't need to be told what is dharma, adharma. In fact, for them, everything is one. So it's different from their perspective, but we need it for practical purposes in life. And when Krishna said to Arjuna in chapter 18, verse 66, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja, which means relinquishing all dharmas, take refuge in me alone. He didn't say that in the sense of relinquish dharma and let's have anarchy. It's not like that. It's an invitation to liberation. Forget about good and bad. You want the supreme truth, which is beyond all duality. So don't bother yourself with these dualistic notions in a spiritual sense. But, from after the war, Arjuna should walk home and be a dharmic person, right? So it's a spiritual teaching versus a social moray teaching. This is a spiritual teaching, transcend dharma. And like last week, I shared with you Shankaracharya's preface to verse 19, and I'll share it again. This is because he's leading into the critical section of this chapter. He says, "Now is the time to explain the nature of liberation through right knowledge." Are we ready? Only on my nose. So let us chant that verse together. You can repeat after me. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yada drashtanupashyati gunebhyascha param veti madbhavam sodhigacchati. I didn't change a lot in this verse. When the seer perceives no agent other than the gunas and knows that supreme being which is beyond, a supreme spirit which is beyond the gunas, he enters into my being, or he attains to my being. So this supreme spirit is basically, it means Paramatman, but that word does not actually come in the translation, in the original Sanskrit. So it's been put into parentheses by our translators in India for good reason. I keep saying over and over again, the ashram version of the Gita doesn't have a commentary in it, so they add a little bit of helpful details to make sure that we don't interpret the words in the wrong way. And enters into is one way of thinking of it, and attains to is also correct. And I made it my being. It was my being, okay. All right, now, one commentator of the 20th century has a nice commentary that I'd like to share with you here. I'm going to share a lot of commentaries with you this evening, and I hope we'll have time left for questions. But they're such beautiful commentaries that I'm really compelled to share them. Especially, we didn't have a whole lot of Jnanadev last week, so this year we'll be getting a more than ample serving of that. So here goes. The senses and the objects of the senses are all nothing but the modifications of the gunas. We learned that already, right? To outgrow the inferior gunas and ascend to the superior gunas is the plan and purpose of worldly life. That's a nice way of looking. You could say that this whole life that we're living is just for the sake of helping us graduate to higher levels of gunas. Is the goal of life reached when one reaches pure sattva? Gaining pure sattva is the climax of earthly life. But even that state has to be transcended. Nirguna Brahman, which means the formless absolute, is beyond all three gunas. Reaching that absolute state is the ultimate goal of all life. There is neither karma nor activity in that state. It is the highest goal to be attained, though it cannot be defined in words. So we have to take it. It's an article of faith. It's like, show me that, and then I'll do it. We can't have that arrogant attitude. And many of you would know Sri Ramakrishna Devan. He has a beautiful quote that fits here. It's a question he is asking. What are the indications of God revealing himself in the heart of the devotee? The dawn is the harbinger of the sunrise. Similarly, selflessness, purity, the absence of identification with the body, and such divine qualities precede the spiritual vision of God. well, in Amma's case, she's not waiting for the darshan of God, but this proves that such a person continues to manifest those qualities: selflessness, purity. She doesn't identify with her body, as you know. Every day, I wince when I see her sit in lotus posture, because we know, when she gets up afterwards, she's, walking with her knee is not cooperating. To her, it's just meat. It's not. She doesn't look at it as her self. But I would just wish she would be a little easier on herself. But she just does it every single day. So that shows that she does not care about that pain and all that. So no identification with the body. Previously, we talked about how different types of sadhana can help us gradually elevate from one guna to the other, from tamas all the way to sattva. So you may remember that karma yoga is prescribed for us to remove the lowest tamas from us, and the sadhana of upasana is to help us go even further. Take that rajas and turn it into sattva. Now you should remember that upasana refers to a expanded definition of bhakti yoga, and it includes all kinds of visualization and methods to focus on and remember our beloved deity. So that means it involves forms, names and forms. But the point is to have us maintain a constant remembrance of God, the God that is closest to us. It could be with form or it could be without a form, but even when doesn't have a specific form, there has to be some notion there. It could be, compassion, love, nature. So all these things, we need something to latch onto for our mind to focus. We're not ready to go for the absolute, the formless absolute. So up to there is upasana, and then when we move on to meditate on the formless absolute, that is a different level of sadhana. So we'll get there. As sattva guna increases, though, we can dive deeper in meditation. We can dive deeper into scriptural study, and most importantly, we can absorb Amma's teachings and the significance of her actions and retain all of that. Most importantly, how many times have we heard Amma's satsangs? Every day we're hearing them now. How much can we remember? It was just this morning. Do we remember everything she said? Because she didn't say a whole lot, but what the other person said and what she said afterwards. So sattva guna will help us retain all these things. And when we talk about realization and liberation, the cognitive shift in our self-perception that results from this process is one way of looking at knowledge. We say that we need knowledge to attain liberation. But what is that knowledge? We're hearing what Amma says, we're reading what Krishna says, we're maybe reading other scriptures as well. Is a cognitive shift taking place within us? That's the question. Because only that is the sign that we have internalized it. Do I see myself differently? It should not be like, oh, I've studied the Gita. Which chapter are you on? Oh, I'm way past you. We're not learning anything from the scriptures. You didn't even read the Upanishads. What are you? You're just a beginner. This is all wrong concepts. There should be a change inside of me. I should be viewing my being in a different way. That shows that I learned something from Amma or the scriptures or both. And the more we absorb Amma's being, either directly or remotely, the closer we get to transcending all three gunas. And complete transcendence is obviously what we mean by God realization, and God realization is what we mean by transcending the gunas. Now, some people may wonder, first I'm tamasic, then rajasic, and then I become sattvic, but these are all different attributes, right? So I have all these attributes, qualities in my physical body and subtle body, and then you're saying that I'm going to become attributeless. How can something that has properties at one point become free from all those properties? Doesn't make sense. It sounds like a proposition to turn the finite into the infinite. What do you think? Is it nonsense? Is it illogical? Well, this is where we need to understand the words of realized beings. What Krishna actually is getting at is that our true nature is already nirguna chaitanya, attributeless awareness, consciousness. That is something that that is our true nature from the beginning. We don't have to struggle to become that. We have to remove the obstacles to seeing that. That's all it is. And what is the obstacle? The problem is that we identify with other things. We identify with the body, the mind, all the thoughts. If anger sprouts up, we become anger, not angry. You may have heard that expression. You're not becoming angry, you're becoming anger. It's true. Becoming anger means we identify with it. And we forget completely who we really are. So, it's not a question of becoming something that we aren't now. It's a question of removing all those things that are preventing us from seeing our true nature. And from chapter 13, Krishna has been emphasizing our problem of misidentification with the body and the mind. And that's what leads us to the wrong condition that we are, to the wrong conclusion that we are saguna. We think that we are this body. We come to that conclusion either, unconsciously or just without any knowledge of the scriptures at all. It happens. So, even Amma's teaching, it's not going to change us into the formless absolute. She's not here to change us. Okay? Does that make sense? She's here to remove the veils, help us remove the veils to see who we have always been. We've never been anything else but the supreme, absolute, formless Brahman. So some modern commentators refer to this as owning up to our own true nature. So if it's my own true nature, I have to own up to that. I cannot claim the body to be me any longer. Sorry, you heard the Gita teachings and Amma's teachings, it's too late. You can't go back. I tried that after meeting Amma, it didn't work though, so don't try it, I'm telling you. Then he says, when the seer perceives. What does he mean by seer and what does he mean by perceives? Krishna intentionally doesn't use that word seeker because that indicates somebody who is on the path. They're still struggling. So he uses the word seer. And in this case, it very clearly, according to Shankaracharya, it means someone who's enlightened, a seer with capital S, right? He sees properly or she sees properly. And what does it mean to see properly? Well, it means to see that there is no agent in all actions other than the gunas. So the gunas do everything. There's no other doer. That's the point of this verse. And also, the one who really sees properly is the one who can see that it is the gunas who do everything. To be correct, we cannot say that the guna itself does everything. The guna is a guna. Sattva is sattva, and rajas, tamas similarly. But it is the combination of the body and mind that become the doer. Without a body, there's no doing anything. And the mind can have mental activity, but not physical activity. So when these two come together, we have physical and mental activity going on. And the reason why the gunas take the blame is because the body and the mind are made up of the gunas. Trigunatmika, body. Trigunatmika, subtle body. So without the gunas, there would be no body, there would be no subtle body, physical and subtle bodies. So the real the correct perception is that the gunas alone, in the form of the physical and subtle bodies, does all actions. And this same concept has already come up in chapter 3, verse 27. Actions are in every case performed by the gunas. One whose mind is deluded by the sense of I believes I am the doer. And don't we think that I am the doer all the time? I have to do this, I have to do that. Oh, I didn't do that, I have to do that. You know, yesterday I did that. No, that I did that, that's mine. You know, so all these things we identify with. We think that we're the one that's doing. That means we're not, you know, in one sense we can say we're identifying with the body, but in another sense we can say we're identifying with the gunas, to be a little more technical. So the gunas are prakriti, they are matter, they are anatma. So we're saying anatma is what does all the actions. The body, the kshetra, all these, matter does everything. That seems bizarre, but we know that out there in the earth there are minerals and all kinds of, you know, chemical reactions taking place on their own, and nobody's telling them to do it or making them do it. So when the gunas perform actions, so to speak, where do those actions take place? Right? You have the gunas in our physical body and subtle body. And we're doing them where? Well, we're doing them in this world, right? And what is the world? Is the world pure consciousness? Depends. If you are a realized being, you can say that, and it'll be true. If you are a samsari, if you're locked in Maya, like all of us, it's only parroting if you say that. So for us, it's Maya. There's a duality here. So prakriti is the word we use, which means matter in modern parlance. So the gunas are doing all these actions in the field of Maya. And what is the nature of Maya, of prakriti? It is also trigunatmikam. It is also the three gunas. So this, remember in the last chapter, he talked about the kshetram. This whole world is a field of Maya. It's made up of the gunas. So the gunas, in the form of the physical and subtle bodies, act in the field of matter, which is also made up of nothing but the same gunas. It's a matter-matter interaction. It's an anatma interaction. It is a guna-to-guna interaction. And that is the life that we know. It is nothing but matter interacting with matter. It's kind of sad, right? What was the word we used for it? It is inert. One inert thing interacting with another inert thing. Because our world is our body, mind, intellect. When are we ever fixed and established in pure consciousness, witness consciousness? Maybe a few seconds, or if we're lucky, a few minutes per day. The rest of our life is just matter interacting with it, matter. So that shows that this Maya, we should not be deluded by it. We should not go running after it, like Amma has been pointing out in her satsangs. And then he says, one who knows that supreme spirit which is beyond the gunas. What is that supreme spirit that is beyond the gunas? Well, only one who truly knows that it is the gunas that do all actions, by definition, should be one who knows the Paramatman. One, like if we really know that it is the gunas that do all the actions of the world, in truth, we're not actually seeing that, we're not experiencing that, we're talking about it here intellectually. But once that becomes our actual experience, that is proof that the person is one with the Paramatman, or is identified with the Paramatman, knows the Paramatman. Without understanding that which is beyond all the gunas, how can we be sure that all actions are performed by the gunas? We're not witnessing it really because we're too much in the gunas. So in order to see that it is only the gunas performing everything, we have to transcend them, and that means know the Paramatman. And that means knowing our own self. It's not like we're knowing some foreign entity. It means that the knower knows that Paramatman not as an object, but as their own true nature. We understand that we are actionless and beyond the gunas. There's nobody beyond the guru. And since the gunas make up all that we know about our individuality for the time being, we should understand that being beyond or going beyond the gunas means we have already transcended the body, any sense of body ownership or identification, like the energies, the mind, all the intellect, everything. We should be beyond all of that. That means we can see those as though they were not us. Like you're looking in the mirror and you're seeing it, or like you're looking at somebody else's body. It's not me. So if we can do that, we can say we've gone beyond the gunas. So it means that we know ourselves as the Atman. Now, let's say we get curious and they say, okay, I want to go beyond the gunas, but how do I know when I have gone beyond them? Well, there's no explanation or logic provided here in this verse, but Shankaracharya fortunately gives us that explanation. He says that that which stands as the witness of the activities of the gunas is superior to the gunas. So, like I was saying a moment ago, we are so involved in whatever the gunas are doing in our body and subtle body, we can't witness them. So we are not beyond them. We are not superior to the gunas. We are enmeshed in them, entangled in them. But if the day comes where we can actually witness those gunas gunas expressing themselves, and if we can witness that in a detached way, that would be a beautiful, victorious day, because it means God realization, self-realization. The witness is always different from that which is witnessed. This is the concept. But we may say, then, if that's the case, how is it possible for me to witness my own body? How do you think it's possible? Well, it means that you're not the body. Surprise. The same goes for all elements of our individuality. We can witness our energy, we can witness our thoughts, we can witness even our vasanas, our intellectual convictions, all for that same reason. They are not me. All of these elements change, but that witness consciousness remains the same always and eternally. So self-realization represents a complete shift from identification with the changing to the changeless, from saguna to nirguna, from the form to formless. And what is the fruit of all this toil? He enters into my being. He attains to my being. So what does that mean? What are we attaining? I mean, okay, we're realizing God. Yes, but what does that mean? Krishna said, the benefit is that he immediately attains my nature. That's what this verse says. And Shankaracharya tells us a little bit more. He says, this person attains my status as Vasudeva, for he sees that everything is Vasudeva. Vasudeva, as a name, is, in Krishna's case, is taken to mean that which pervades everywhere. After many births, and he quotes chapter 7, verse 19, which goes, after many births, the wise one worships me, realizing that all this is God. So when that means we will see everything as God. That's really like our life's ambition if we're an Amma devotee. But what is so important about attaining God's nature? Okay, I see everything as God, but what difference does that make? Well, because in essence, God is that formless consciousness. So if I realize that, that means I've realized I myself have become formless. And attaining to that nature means realizing my own formless nature as Vasudeva, the all-pervasive one. And to be all-pervasive, can you have a form? No, of course you cannot, because the very meaning of the word form indicates the existence of a limitation. And light is all-pervasive only because it doesn't have a form. So realizing God's formless essence is equal to realizing my formless essence, and all of our problems, all of our sorrows, all of our misery are coming from what? The formless absolute, or are they coming from this identification with the form? Everything comes from our body. If we didn't have this body, we wouldn't have any body-related sorrow. We may, until we reach God realization, we might have some of those mental suffering that Amma talked about when we talked about death. But the body is an example. Physical body, when that's gone, so much pain and sorrow is gone. Then when we de-identify from the subtle body and the intellect, then all of our suffering is gone. Now, we have some quote from Jnanadev, and I love how he makes it so much more real for us. Enough of this discussion. Only recognize the Supreme. The fire assumes the shape of the firewort it pervades. The fertility of the soil becomes perceptible in the form of a tree growing in it. Milk takes the form of yogurt. Sweetness becomes felt in the form of sugarcane. In that way, the three gunas assume the body form accompanied by the mind and therefore become the cause of bondage. So there's only one source of bondage, and that is the gunas in the physical and subtle bodies and our identification with that. But the wonder of it is that this entanglement of the gunas in the body in no way affects the independence of the Atman, the self. While playing their part in the body, according to their respective properties, all three gunas in no way affect the attributeless state of the Supreme Self. Complete liberation is thus easy. Wow, that's news to me. Consciousness, although abiding among the gunas, does not follow them. And this is realized when the human being attains the self. One realizes the unreality of a dream when he awakes from sleep. One realizes when he stands on the bank of a river looking at his own image that what is broken into sundry images on the surface of the water at the upsurge of ripples is unsubstantial. And an actor is not deceived by his own skill in the art of dressing and makeup. In the same way, the individual soul should view the gunas without getting absorbed in them. Again, Amma's point. She said, show respect to Maya. We have to treat it respectfully because it is a manifest of God's form, but don't go running after it. Don't be deluded by it. Same thing. Instead of saying Maya, we're just saying the gunas. So you could say the individual soul should view Maya without getting absorbed in it. The sky experiences all the 3 seasons. In India, they only have 3 seasons. We could say 4 seasons here. Yet it does not permit any defect in its own form. In that way, the self-same Paramatman, beyond the gunas, even though abiding amidst them, continues to occupy its original seat in the form of the notion, I, myself, am the Supreme Brahman. From that original seat, it says, I am only a witness, myself doing absolutely nothing. It is these gunas that set up this array of activity. the scope of the activity widens through the different properties of the three gunas. The impetus to do actions is the disorder of the gunas. Now we know why we feel like doing things. Were you to ask me how I got entangled, with reference to the tangle, the answer is that I am what the spring season is to the loveliness of the woods. I am what the sunrise is to the dim of the brilliance of the stars. I am the brightening of the sunstone, or the blowing fully open of the lotus, or the expulsion of the darkness at sunrise. Just as for these results, the sunrise is the origin, similarly, I abide in the body form in my pristine state as a non-doer, yet I am in no way affected by the actions. The gunas become perceptible because I display them. Also, I maintain their power, and what remains behind after their total extinction is myself, the attributeless and eternal Paramatman. So one who rises through such discernment follows the ascending path beyond the gunas. That was Jnanadev's words. One who rises through such discernment follows the ascending path beyond these gunas. So there's hope for us, okay? And now let us read the next verse. Gunanetan atityatrin dehi deha samudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukkhair hi. It's actually jara dukkhaihi. Vimukto mritam ashnute. The reason why I said that is because when you chant the whole verse, it becomes correct. But when you break it in the middle, it's not proper. At least that's how I feel. And we have a very close translation to the original. Having transcended these three gunas, out of which the body is evolved, the embodied one is freed from birth, death, decay, and sorrow, and attains to immortality. So, in the previous verse, Krishna said that the benefit of this knowledge is that we attain to God's being, which means God realization, of course. And now we're going to hear what that means experientially. Too many times when you read the scriptures, it just kind of tickles your imagination, but you don't get the experiential understanding of it. So that is going to be the subject of this verse, which provides the commentary for that part of the previous verse. So what is the greatness of God? Well, if God was also stuck in samsara, would we think he was great? You know, he's like, darn it, I really shouldn't have had that second piece of cake. You know, God, you mean you're a prisoner of Maya also? We're all done for, right? The reason why God is great is because he's beyond samsara. He's the ruler of Maya. We are enslaved by Maya. We are stuck in samsara. So he is free from samsara. He has no karma, no birth or death. So that's a very stark contrast from our life. So this divine nature is what is referred to, attained by the one who transcends the gunas. Sorry, the divine nature is what is conferred to or attained to by these people who transcend the gunas. It means that is a must state. So what is samsara? it's repeated birth, death, decay, and sorrow. Like birth is okay, yeah, great. Growth, okay, good. How about death, decay, sorrow? No, I don't want that part. I just want the birth and the growth and the happiness part. Sorry. It's a mandatory 2-for-1. If you choose Maya and Samsara, it's you got to take the whole enchilada. And the first part of the enchilada may taste sweet, but the second half, it's probably like the second 2/3, is pretty bitter. So order at the cafe of life very wisely. So the way to become free from this samsara is to transcend the gunas. That's the concept. Because, as Shankaracharya says, the gunas constitute the limiting component of Maya. Maya seems infinite, but because of the gunas, there's always compartmentalization, and all of us identifying with this body is only because there's a limit to it. If we were just all pervasive light, we wouldn't identify with anything. But we have these gunas that make us limited, feel limited. So these bodies, these physical and subtle bodies, are the clearest symbol of Maya in our lives, which is exactly what Krishna says. In these 3 gunas, out of which the body is evolved. In one way or another, all the pain we experience in life is connected with this body. So transcending the gunas means to relinquish our identification with the bodies. Another commentator has said that a Jivan Mukta is one who is free from the body consciousness, even while dwelling in the body. When you leave the body and when you attain liberation upon leaving the body, we call it Videha Mukti. So but Jivan Mukti means while you're in the body, you attain God realization. An example would be Ramana Maharishi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, etc. So that person who may still be in the body is already established in the bliss of Brahman. So even though he has a body or she has a body, effectively they have transcended the gunas. And Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, he is like the betel nut in its shell. So the betel nut is the fruit of a kind of palm tree. When still tender, this nut and its shell hold fast to each other. But when ripe, the nut separates itself from the shell. In the ripeness of Brahmajnana, knowledge of the Supreme, the body consciousness drops away. You don't have to do anything to make it go away. You need to have more knowledge. The more we understand our true nature, the more body consciousness will drop away or fall away. That's, if we want to put it in grades, we can think of it that way. And another way of looking at this, which is also Shankaracharya's view, is that by crossing over the gunas, we are preventing further births from taking place. Shankaracharya says, the gunas are the origin of the body, the seed of the birth of the body. But how can we say that the gunas are responsible for future births? So that answer actually came already in the previous birth, in the previous verse. Maybe in the previous birth also. Krishna said that the gunas are the doer in all circumstances. Okay, that's fine. Let the gunas do everything. But the problem is that we identify with those, gosh darn gunas. We're just not free from them, is the problem. And thus, we also become the doer. We're writing our return address on every single thing we do, and the doer always accumulates the karma, whether it's good or bad. So this is a guarantee that we're going to have another birth. It ensures that we get to have this experience again. If you don't want that guarantee, then we have to start letting go of the identification with the body, mind, and intellect. Another way of thinking of it is that we have given ourselves in marriage to 3 spouses. So you can call it your 3 wives or your 3 husbands, whatever you want. We can separate from or we can divorce our physical spouse. That's easy. I mean, compared to what I'm going to say. We can even decide not to get married. We can even decide not to have a partner. But we still have those same spouses. The physical body, the subtle body, and the karmic, or we could say the causal body. We're not only married to these 3 spouses, we identify with them more than we could ever identify with an actual spouse. If your spouse gets hurt, you identify, but not as much as we identify with our own body, with our own mind, and our own intellect. And we have created so many problem children with these 3 spouses in the form of vasanas, negative emotions, and the resulting sorrow. So this unholy matrimony with these 3 bodies is which creates all of these problem children that we struggle with every day. The only way to get a divorce once and for all is to cross over the 3 gunas. Because then we are no longer the doer, and we have no more karma, no more birth, and no more death. He uses that term, the embodied one, which Shankaracharya says, the Sanskrit word is dehi. Shankaracharya says, he calls it the embodied one, and he says that it is actually referring to an enlightened sage. That means the context of this verse cannot be otherwise. It means it has to be someone who's realized. Having attained God realization, we become free from birth, death, old age, and suffering. That's what it means. And what is the fruit of that? Amritam Ashnute. Did you notice that we chanted Amma's name, Amritam, when we were chanting the verse? We attain immortality. But I think we would rather take it as we attain Amma, right? So to clarify, Shankaracharya says, one experiences immortality or Amma, even in this life, is if we go beyond the gunas. We don't have to wait in a queue and go to Brahmaloka or something like that. It can happen today. Amma says, why? People say, how many years will it take to get God realized? Amma says, why are you talking about years? Why don't you try to realize God now, today? Then people will say, well, actually, there's a basketball game tonight, or actually my daughter's graduation is tomorrow. Maybe a few weeks from now? Is that okay? So we don't want liberation today, even though we could have it. And that word immortality should never be construed as physical. Because by now I hope we all know that it is just a fanciful notion to think that this Ponce de Leon, poor guy, So how could be somebody who led such a huge expedition be so ignorant? Because the body is made out of Maya. And we know that Maya is constantly changing. When doesn't your body change? Every day it feels different, right? Every day it looks different. So the only eternal thing in Maya is change. And death is just another form of change. So immortality is only applicable to consciousness, to Chaitanyam, to awareness, to Atman, Brahman. And that is what is meant by Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. When we chant that, we're not saying that I want my body to become immortal. I want to let go of the attachment to the body and identify with the Atma. May my identification shift in that way. That's what the prayer is. Now, many people ask, what is realization like? And then I usually tell them, you go ask Amma. But we have a beautiful passage from Jnanadev that explains some aspects of it. We can take, he's very generous in sharing this. So I'm just going to read it, and you can get what you can from it. Such a person of knowledge becomes one with me, and he's speaking on behalf of Krishna. That's what he does. He identifies 100% with Krishna when he talks, when he speaks like Krishna, and he does the same for Arjuna. Anybody he is assuming, he just becomes that being. Such a person of knowledge becomes one with me in the way a river joins the sea and becomes one with it. Just as the parrot in the parrot and tube story, whatever that is, just as the parrot should extricate itself from the tube and sit with a free mind on a tree branch, in that way the one possessed of knowledge, casting away Maya, takes a seat on the original site in the form of the notion, I am myself, Supreme Brahman. One who was snoring loudly in slumber in the form of ignorance is now completely awake, having realized the essence of the Supreme Self. The mirror in the form of delusion, leading to a wavering mind, having dropped from his hand, he is deprived of even the semblance of any sort of wavering. The fury of the storm in the form of identification with the body having abated, the individual soul and the Supreme Soul become united like the waves in the sea, with the result that the individual soul is immediately merged in the Paramatman, in the same way that the clouds get extinguished in the sky at the end of the monsoon. Here in Chicago, we feel like that because we had a mini monsoon, like for off and on for a whole week. We had torrential rains here. And now today, maybe just to welcome this verse in the Gita, Amma gave us beautiful sunny day. Don't get attached to it. It's all Maya, right? But it's nice that this commentary matches the weather of the day. Continuing, even after being merged into the Supreme Brahman, the individual soul has to continue in the body till its fall. Still, he does not go under the sway of the gunas that spring up in the body. Just as the light of the lamp placed in a glass case cannot be restrained from penetrating outside, or just as the underwater fire does not get extinguished by the seawater, the coming and going of the gunas does not in any way defile the realization of the Supreme Self on his part. This helps us to understand Amma. She's got this whirlwind of activity going on around here during darshan. We should know that it does not affect her realization one bit. Even though she is participating in it, even though she is moving quickly, even though she's telling you, no, give the candy like this, no, put the person like this so I can hug more people because I want to hug as many people as I can. You know, all of this is Maya, yes, true, but none of that affects her inner experience. The moon in the sky continues untouched, even though she is reflected in water. In that way, even though he seems to be continuing in the body form, that means after being God realized, he is not affected by any body attributes. The three gunas, according to their whims and bias, play their role in the body, yet he does not waste even a moment in looking at them, forgetting that he is the Supreme Brahman. In other words, he doesn't forget he is the Supreme Brahman. The self is so established in his heart that he is not even cognizant of what takes place in the body. That's my problem with Amma, that she doesn't pay any attention to her body. And I think if Amma's attendant Swami Sri Lakshmi read this, she would say, oh, that's my problem every day. I can't get Amma to rest. Getting her to do anything for herself is just impossible. But we can't blame her because she's established in Brahman. So the next part explains it. A serpent sheds its skin and goes underground. What does it care about the discarded skin? The same happens here. The fragrance of a fully blown and matured lotus spreads out and merges into the sky, but never returns to the lotus itself. In that way, one merged in Supreme Brahman does not even know what the body is or what its functions are. Therefore, birth, old age, death, and other states remain only in the body itself. So, when Amma says, one day that little Kunya Niranjan said, Amma, you have to give me the knowledge. You have to make me drink the knowledge of, the milk of knowledge from you. And then Amma laughed and Swamiji said, we'll give you a bottle. And he says, no, I want to drink it directly, the milk from Amma. And then Amma laughed so hard, and then she says, I'm too old for that. But don't be fooled. She's not referring to the Paramatman old. No, that body, whatever she can make the body live 1,000 years if she wants. But she's just allowing Maya to go its course. And so she's saying the body is old. But that word I is just a show. The knower remains unconcerned in regard to the body. When an earthen jar cracks and is broken into pieces, the space seen in the jar automatically merges into the total space. In that way, with the Chittabhasa, which means the reflection of consciousness in our subtle body, when that leaves at the time of death, and the oneness with the Supreme is established. Not the time of death. In that way, when the identification with the mind leaves, and the oneness with the Supreme is established, what else but the Supreme Self could remain? So, once that Jivan Mukti takes place, the only thing remaining is the Supreme Self, Paramatman. And then Jnanadev says, this is Krishna still talking. I call such a one gunatitaha, since he continues in the embodied condition, fully possessed of the realization of Supreme Self. Now, hearing all this, who wouldn't become curious? Arjuna wants to understand who might have attained that goal. How do we identify such a person? And in chapter 2, he asks Krishna how a realized being walk. I think it's about verse 53 or so. How does such a realized being walk, talk, and behave? And Krishna gave a beautiful answer at that time, but Arjuna didn't understand, the connection between that and what he's hearing now. So he's repeating his question basically in different language. He's going to ask a very similar question about that realized being, which is also, we can call that stira prajna, stita prajna, gunatitaha, parabhaktaha, jivan muktaha, jnani bhaktaha. All these things, they mean the same thing, realization. So let us now read 21, verse 21. Arjuna uvacha Kairalingastrin Gunan etan Atito Bhavati Prabho Kimachara Katam Chaitam Trin Gunan Ativartate. Arjuna said, by what signs or marks, O Lord, is one known who has gone beyond these three gunas? What is his conduct? And how does he go beyond these gunas? So Arjuna is basically asking three questions. What are the indications of a gunatitaha, one who has gone beyond? It means just a knower of the self, So it's what are the signs of a realized being? That's what it means. Second question is, how does he conduct himself or herself in the day-to-day world? And how, most important, how does one, or like he's probably thinking, how do I become that? And though it was mentioned before, it's a lot of us ask Amma similar questions, and she has the patience to answer all of them, even though she's repeating herself. He's going to indulge Arjuna's question and give a response. Not a whole lot more to say here, except I want to share Jnanadev's commentary. Pleased at the Lord's words, Arjuna said, "What are the distinguishing marks that appear in one in whom such realization of the self gets deep-rooted?" So now we're seeing very clearly it's self-realization. How does the attributeless one conduct himself? How does he transcend the gunas? All of this should be told to me by the parental of home of kindness, yourself. Hearing Arjuna's question, Krishna said, "O Partha, it is a novel thing that you are asking only for so much and not more. If this be your only doubt, you are welcome to ask about it, and now hear the signs I will tell you." We're eavesdropping on this conversation without any compunction, right? All right, the next verse, we'll move quickly, because we have this next verse is a very important one. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Prakashancha Pravrittincha Mohameva Cha Pandava Nadveshti Sampravrittani Nanivrittani Kankshati. The Blessed Lord said, "One who neither hates nor desires the presence or absence of the light, activity, and delusion, O Pandava." It doesn't sound like a full sentence. So the question again was, by what signs can I identify, basically, right? Of the three questions, he's only getting an answer to the first one now. And Krishna responds with those indications. He doesn't say a full sentence. What are the indications? Such a person neither hates nor desires the presence or absence of the following things. So this is the whole, in this present rendition of it, the whole, compared with what you're looking at on the screen, or we're looking at on the screen. We should put it on the screen one more time, even though it's quite different. The last part, nor longs for them when they ceased, that comes up to the top for ease of understanding. And it becomes, the first indication is that this person neither hates nor desires the presence or absence of the light. What is light? Remember, well, that was the description of sattva, so it means the effect of sattva. This person neither hates nor desires the presence or absence of activity, which is rajas. This person neither hates nor desires the presence of or absence of delusion, which is tamas. So it means none of it matters to them. It doesn't matter whether there's a tamasic atmosphere or, a rajasic atmosphere, sattva. And we'll even go a little bit deeper than that, but I don't want to say that now because you might get confused. Again, I want to share various commentaries here at the beginning because they help so much in understanding this verse. It's kind of a cryptic verse, right? And I just invite you to try to listen and try to visualize such a being in your mind's eye, what kind of a being would be like this? Shankaracharya says, he indicates the kind of thoughts that would not be in somebody who has transcended the gunas. And he's suggesting these are the kind of thoughts they would never have. Oh, a tamasic mental state has arisen, so I am deluded. Oh, a rajasic action, essentially painful, has sprung up, dragging me away from my own nature. Oh, this slip from my real nature as the Atman is so tragic. An essentially luminous state, a sattvic state, has now arisen. And now I have viveka, and this is making me attached to comfort. Only one who is not fully realized dislikes them in this manner. The one who has transcended the gunas does not dislike them. Right? Transcending it means you don't care about them, you know? You don't have this hate for them, or you don't have a like for them either. Unlike the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic people desire their states when they lapse, the sage does not desire them when they disappear. So they neither yearn for, like she said, Krishna said earlier, that an example of tamas is that desire to do bad things or to do forbidden things. He gets all excited when there's like this prospect of doing something bad. That's why, you tell somebody in that age, don't do this, that's exactly what they're going to do because they're in that state, like a tamasic state. So they don't have that problem where, they want to do something they're not supposed to do, and they also, don't care when any one of these states goes away. So, another commentary continues to say, the one immersed in sattva has his intellectual pursuits and refined pleasures in which he is deeply absorbed. We would all love to have our, spirituality fill our lives in so many forms. Scriptural learning has a remarkable hold on the devotee. Pious discourse, rapturous bhajans, deep meditation, all of these are meticulously practiced by a person of sattvic disposition. If these doings are interrupted or dropped for a day, the aspirant feels as if a great spiritual loss has been inflicted on him. This feeling is the sign of his being attached to sattva guna. Okay, don't get me wrong. I would say that's a wonderful attachment to have. And Amma wants us to have that attachment for the time being. Because what's the option? Okay, it's going to be rajasic things. It's going to be selfishness. It's going to be anger and jealousy. So she knows that's the alternative. So she's like, no. Go for sattva. Do all these things all day long. Think about them all day long and feel like you're missing something when you don't do it. Because at this point in time, you're not going to feel the loss of not realizing yourself. The closest thing we can get to lamenting that we haven't realized ourselves is to lament the absence of sattva, the absence of bhajans, the absence of archana, and so on. But the one who has transcended the gunas has nothing to gain by adhering to these observances and nothing to lose by abandoning them. With or without these good occupations, the Brahmajnani, the knower of the Supreme, ever rests in Brahman. So in Amma's sadhana days, which were simply a show to show us how to do it, she didn't need to do sadhana, don't be fooled. She was born that way. She was born whoever she is now. She didn't have to do any sadhana, but she says, if I didn't do sadhana, my disciples and devotees would say, well, my guru didn't do any sadhana, I'm not going to do any. Right? We'd all become lazy. So just for our sake, she showed us how to do it. But in those days, she didn't go to any temples. She didn't, sit there and I'm going to meditate at 5 a.m. She was just completely immersed in bliss all day long. And sometimes she didn't even know what was up and down and left and right like that. So for such a person, they don't need an I am technique, or they don't need a homa, or they don't need anything, right? We need it because we're not there. If you're there, I want to meet you in person. Like Amma was saying this morning, the people who don't come for the regular meditation, I'm going to read out all their names every day. Something tells me that they're probably not God realized yet. That was why she's going to do it, because they're not coming because they're realized, they're coming. She didn't say ... It means maybe they were lazy or something. The man caught up in rajas is always up and doing. What seems good to him, he executes devotedly, and what he sees as bad is abhorred and avoided. Going to the temple regularly without any understanding, doing elaborate rituals out of desire, are their version of spirituality. So it's a bit of a criticism, but that is a kind of impetus. Don't stop there. Keep going forward and go deeper. But the one who has gone beyond the gunas has no personal attachment to these observances. Nothing is gained by him in adhering to them, and nothing is lost by relinquishing them. Same thing. He does any and every good action devotedly, and he is equally superb when doing nothing at all. Just like Amma. When she's out there, on tour, hugging people and giving out free houses and clothes and, free weddings without dowry, she may stay up for days at a time. She's so superb and so radiant at that time, but when she's doing nothing, just sitting there on the pitam, waiting for the next song, she's also breathtakingly magnificent. And he says one more thing, it is impossible for any bad deed to emanate from him. We'll say Amma, her. To the one adhering to tamas, lethargy and sleep are most welcome. He is very much annoyed if his sleep is disturbed. So you may know somebody like that, or that may be you also. But that man who has crossed over the gunas treats sleep and wakefulness alike. His body is given the required repose, which automatically gets reduced to its bare minimum in the case of an enlightened being. The Brahmajnani, the knower of Brahman, who has soared beyond the three gunas, demonstrates merits found in a mirror. This is really beautiful. It truly reflects the objects placed before it. When nothing is presented before it, it remains in its own state. The mirror is in no way affected by the appearance and disappearance of things in its proximity. Similar to this is the place gained by the three gunas in the mind of the sage, who transcended them, right? So the gunas get a place in the mind of the sage, even in Amma's mind, but only insofar as they do in a mirror. While they come and go, she remains unaffected by them. One more beautiful quote from Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He says, how do the Jivan Muktas, the liberated souls, live in the world? It's good to know, right? They live like the kingfisher. We even our nature chat with WhatsApp, we have all these pictures of the kingfishers thanks to our Nishkama. So next time we look at a kingfisher, we're going to think of this example. They live like the kingfisher that dives deep into the water to catch fish, but does not get wet. The few drops that happen to be on its feathers are shaken off with ease. The liberated souls are unaffected by the happenings of the world. Now we have to attain that state. That's the challenge. So you can tell from the content of this verse that it's just an answer to Arjuna's first question, and actually the next verse will also just be an answer to his first question. What are the characteristics of one who has transcended the gunas? And don't forget, everybody in this world, every living being in this world has a mixture of the three gunas. So, like we said, one will be dominant, for that person, maybe perhaps their whole life, but then in shorter time spans, other gunas might be a little more dominant than the rest. So there will be all kinds of guna moods fluctuations going on all the time. So to go deeper in spirituality, though, we can leave the gunas to their own, devices. But if we want to go deeper in spirituality, we have to take make conscious effort, and that means to sublimate everything towards sattva. That's what we have to do. But once self-realization is attained, there's no more need for us to pursue any further states, because there are no states after that. After sattva, it's just God realization. So that example of the mirror is very helpful, because we will reflect, just like Amma does, maybe the sattva or the rajas or the tamas in the person. If someone's totally deluded about the reality and suffering as a result, Amma's not going to say, "Oh, you're the supreme being. Why are you crying?" She comes to their level. She reflects that tamas in their mind and talks with them on the level of tamas, the delusion that they may be seeing. And that's okay. But as soon as that person's gone, that tamas is no longer needed, and it disappears. So, how does one react? Well, what is the basis for which a realized being employs these gunas? That we got in Nyandev's commentary. He said, any and every good action is devotedly done by him, and he is equally superb when doing nothing at all. But it is impossible for any bad deed to emanate from her, Amma. So the idea is that they will only use it for good things. They use these gunas just as tools to accomplish good deeds, to help the world. And when that's done, it doesn't affect them at all. So let's just be honest, we're talking about Amma here, right? I think these explanations are just a description of Amma. So let's look at it that way. She witnesses the coming and going of the light of sattva, the activity of rajas, and the delusion of tamas. And that's all present in prakriti. And that may be external or internal. It may be on the physical level, or it may be on the internal level. So in Amma's case, it doesn't belong to her because she rules over Maya, right? So you should understand that. When her body's having some problems, like when you see she gets up, she's struggling, her right knee is always, giving her trouble. She's looking at that. This is the body, it's with this guna, whatever, let it be. That's its problem. It's a separate problem. It's not my problem. I don't have any problems. That's her view, right? She knows that whatever's going on in her knee or whatever it may be, has nothing to do with her per se. And she has nothing to gain or lose by it being in that condition or not being in that condition. There's a story about a Mahatma, and I can't remember where it came from, but we heard it maybe a few months ago. I can't remember. It came on the live stream sometime in the past 18 months. And it was this story about a Mahatma does I guess makes a sankalpa for somebody. It's a little bit fuzzy in my memory. But, the Guru sends his disciple to do all kinds of things, and then Lord Shiva comes to him and says, "I'll give you a boon." He said, "I don't want any boons, because I just want my Guru I'm doing what my Guru said." Ultimately, the conclusion is that Shiva comes to the Guru himself and says, "Look, your disciple's not taking any boons from me. Now you have to ask me for a boon." And he says, "I don't need anything." And then the reason why the disciple was suffering so much is because his Guru had elephantitis on one leg, and he was just he really wanted to get that cured. And so when Shiva came to the Guru, the Mahatma, and basically forced him to take some boon, he said, "Okay, if you force me, then I'll take it. Transfer the elephantitis from my right leg to my left leg. That's all I want. In other words, it doesn't matter to him. It doesn't affect him at all. So we might wonder, does Amma have Rajas and Tamas? Because we're saying that she's oblivious to them, but if she doesn't have them, why should she be oblivious? That doesn't, not a problem. Amma doesn't have Rajas, Tamas, or Sattva, none of them. But she can employ all of them as tools to interact with us. That's what I was saying. And let's say they're like the props that an actor uses. During the play, they need it. It's part of the play, interacting with the other actors. And but when the play is over and the props have served their purpose, he puts it down and he forgets about it. He goes to the green room, changes his clothes, and goes home. So in Amma's case, that home is Paramatman. She can go back home any second, any time. But for our benefit, she doesn't, because we can't interact with her when she's in Samadhi. So she just says, okay, these people are full of all the gunas, so I will stay on that level for their benefit. And we're stuck here, so she comes down and gets stuck with us, seemingly. She's not stuck at all. And looking from another perspective, we can see Amma making the utmost efforts to help the suffering people throughout the world. But doesn't that become like Rajasic activity? Is Amma a Rajasic guru? A Rajasic Mahatma? Is there such a thing? Some people think that maybe Amma's really Rajasic. They have this wrong conception. But what is all this seemingly Rajasic activity? We should view it as a spontaneous outpouring of compassion, which she embodies fully. Just like we inhale and exhale involuntarily and without any particular desire. You don't think, I'm going to become rich. I'm going to have a Ferrari. I'm going to have a big house. We don't have any desires assigned with every breath. We just do it involuntarily, and it happens on its own, and we never stop doing it until the last day. So just like that, we do that because it is what human beings do naturally. That's important to understand. And we have no desires behind that. In the same way, the compassion that overflows from Amma perennially and with no particular desire in mind is a natural manifestation of her state of God realization. She cannot do otherwise. Just like we can't stop breathing. She can't stop being compassionate. And compassion means, it's the tangible manifestation of love. That's what she says. Compassion is the visible form of love. And for her, love is non-dual. It means she knows everybody is one with her. So she wants to help every single being on this planet. And whatever she can do to accomplish that, she does it. And at the same time, if one effort doesn't succeed, she's not upset. She has nothing to gain or lose from all those efforts, right? But the flow of compassion won't cease either. Just like our breath is not going to cease just because we cough or hiccup or something like that. The flow of compassion will keep on going forever. And she has said that she is ready to take any number of births to help her children reach the goal. A pretty profound sankalpa, resolve that she's taking for all of us. Jnanadeva also explains or describes what that gunatitaha, that person who's gone beyond the gunas, looks like. He's going to give examples, his style, right? What are they like? One whom the notion that he alone is the master of action doer, that he alone is the master action doer, does not even touch when the rajas waxes strong and the body issues forth blossoms of activism and activity encircles the being. In other words, even when rajas is all around him, Even when the mind may be in a very rajasic mood, and the rajas itself is trying to assert doership, the realized being is not even touched by that, one little bit. So, like I was giving an example before, just visualize the darshan, the darshan chair, the center where Amma is. So much activity, so much rajas, all day long, all night long. None of that affects her, none of it touches her. That's the point. One who does not worry himself if action bears no fruit at all. Right? So I have seen Amma at the end of Devi Bhava standing at the edge of the stage, just about to, throwing flowers already. And she realizes that there's a family, a mother with 3 small kids, single mother with 3 small kids. That woman didn't get darshan. I've never seen this before, and I don't think I've ever seen it after. She calls them up to the stage. It takes them, it's so crowded. This is in San Ramon, you know how crowded it is there. Waited for them to get to the stage, gave them each darshan the same length, if not longer than whatever she would give to anybody else. And then they got off the stage, and the curtain closed. So, but if they were not there, if she was, she realized that they were not there, but even if they didn't show up in the middle of the hall, she's still in bliss. That blissful expression on her face at the end of Devi Bhava is not going to change whether those people were there in the hall or not. But she sees them and she says, and the compassion flows, and she says, get up here. And that was such a touching scene to see, I must say. One who does not get puffed up at his own state of being learned when the sattva waxes strong and all the sense organs get illuminated with the light of knowledge. So even sattva does not become a source of ego. One who does not fall a victim to delusion or does not worry over ignorance when tamas waxes strong. So in Amma's case, if we talk about ignorance, we can say that Amma uses it as a prop all the time. I have heard her say, so I don't know English. I don't know anything about these things. You guys do it. Like that. She'll say things like that. And we're like, okay, I get it. You're telling me that we're supposed to do it, but I'm never going to accept the fact that I'm never going to accept the suggestion that you don't know something. You are omniscient. You know everything. But you're picking up that prop and saying, I don't know. Okay, what do? You can't argue with her. She'll never admit that she knows everything. So that tamas as a prop in her hand that she can discard at any moment, yes, it's there. So, but that doesn't delude her. One who does not hanker after knowledge while under delusion. In other words, when she's in that state where she's saying, I don't know English, somebody has to translate for me. She doesn't hanker after English, I wish I knew English. None of that is there either. And she does not, we'll just say, she does not attach any importance to activity while possessed of knowledge, but at the same time does not feel sorry if actions take place. So if she's doing darshan and she wants, and there's a need to dispense knowledge, wisdom, then she'll do it. But if there's no need for the knowledge during the activity, she doesn't care either. One who makes no differentiation in the way the sun takes no account of the 3 stages of the day, morning, noon, and evening. For such a one, is there any need of another light of knowledge to make her possessed of knowledge? Does the ocean need rain to make the tide rise? Or even were she to perform actions, will the activity stick to her? Just tell me if the mighty Himalaya mountain ever shivers with cold. Or will it make her lose her knowledge if she face delusion? Could the intense heat of summer ever scald the fire? No. The answer to all of these is no. Emphatic no. And we don't have to worry about that in Amma, for sure. And that means that when we attain that state, we won't have to worry about it either. We're going to hear more about this next week when we hear verse 23. Yes, 23. We will conclude with a couple of prayers. I don't have time for the questions today. There were quite a few of them. I will make sure we have time next week. The past 2 weeks we didn't have, so much content, so we got to do other things. So today we barely covered 4 verses, and we'll do the questions next week. Om Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwariye Namaha. The Gita teachings are concluded for today. But let us try to absorb and assimilate Krishna's words, which are none other than Amma's words, and Amma's words are none other than Krishna's words. Let us begin by closing our eyes, checking our posture, and try to slow down the breathing process by taking long, deep breaths. With each long, deep breath, you find the mind also slows down and goes deeper. The more still the mind becomes, the more we can feel Amma's subtle presence all around us and within us. Now let us use the peaceful and harmonious flow of our breath as a focal point for the mind. We are not involved in the breathing process. We are simply witnessing it and watching it, thereby bringing about much more focus in the mind. Witness the breath just like you would witness the wind blowing past you. In reality, they are the same Vayu element. The air in our breath is none other than the same air in the wind. It is not you. It is constantly changing. So allow the witness consciousness to observe it without getting involved. Slowly let go of the breath and continue to witness. Remain in that witness consciousness without any special object. Simply watch. Now slowly bring your awareness back to your body, your surroundings. And try to remain in a very peaceful state for as long as you can, even as we chant the closing mantras. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes if you wish. Om Amriteshwariye Namaha. Thank you all for joining us. I will do my best to have a class next week, but please watch for the e-news. It's a little bit of touch and go next week, but I'll do my best, and we will definitely have a class the following week, and we will be having bhajans from here, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And there's a Homa here on Sunday. If you didn't know, you probably saw all those cards, so I won't repeat it, but yes, we are having a Homa on Sunday. Namaskar.